Oh, hey, Eden.
Hi.
I didn't know that was you. Sorry.
Yeah, it says Michael K.
I know, like, who's that?
I know that, but I don't know why it says that. I don't know how to change it. I knew at one point, but
I've learned that when you join the meeting, if you type in the address instead of just clicking a link, you can change the name. So like ours normally says M&V Paddock, and I can change it to Mark or M or whatever. Now you can type that in before you hit join.
Oh, there you go, Eden. Perfect.
yeah, if you there's the 3 dots up in the corner. If you click on that, you can rename it.
Oh, I do it there. Okay.
Okay, let's begin. It is Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. It is 7:02 p.m. This is a meeting of the Nahant Conservation Commission. Before we get started, I just want to note a couple things. First, going forward, we will be recording our meetings and posting them to the town's YouTube site, page, whatever it's called, channel, I guess. We've never recorded our meetings. No one's ever been particularly interested in what we're doing, but apparently people want to see it. And so we will be doing that from now on. Second thing is I just wanted to note the passing of Ellen Steves, who is a longtime member of the commission and friend to the commission and chair. Very sad, and she's definitely going to be missed. She was a friend to a lot of people. So unfortunately, she won't be joining us anymore. So I guess we will jump into the agenda. The first thing is a notice of intent for 12 Spouting Horn Road, DEP file number 0470595, construction of an in-ground swimming pool, patio, and stairwell for water access within coastal bank, land subject to coastal storm flowage, and the buffer zone to coastal bank. The applicant has requested a continuance on this to our February meeting. So we will not be discussing this tonight. So it is continued at their request. We don't have to vote.
Excuse me. I'm from 8 Spouting Horn Road, Paul Ferragamo, Shirley Lee, and we're not going to be here on the 16th. Is it possible to continue it to a later date?
We can ask the applicant. It is up to them if they would like to do that. They're not here tonight, so I'll have to contact them and see if they'd be willing to do that.
Okay.
So I will check with them and then I will let you know.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
And also, well, I guess if you're not having a meeting, it doesn't matter with the material that we had sent in.
Yeah, so I shared it with the commission, and obviously the applicant has it as well. That's part of why they asked for a continuance. Because we're continuing, we can't talk about it because they're not here. So okay. Unfortunately, we can't discuss it at all. But everybody has a copy, and I'll check with them and let you know how they feel about a continuance to the March meeting.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for joining us. Okay, next up, number 2, a notice of intent for Short Beach, DEP file number 0470596, dune nourishment west of the life-saving station along Short Beach within coastal resource areas.
Good evening. Trey Ruthven here from Sustainable Coastal Solutions on behalf of the town of Nahant. Would it be okay to share my screen, Kristen?
Yes, let me just let you.
Oh.
Okay, go for it.
Can everyone see my screen? I just wanted to check before I start.
Yes.
Okay, great. This project is to restore the dune system running basically from the life-saving station over to Little Nahant. The first few photos I just want to show you are from March 2nd, 2018, which were taken by Coastal Zone Management. And what I really wanted to highlight is kind of the condition of the dune system here and the amount of cobble that is visible. after a storm system. This is, obviously immediately west of the life-saving station. Here you can actually see can you see my mouse when I move it also?
No, I
Okay.
can't. I don't know if anyone else can, but I
I
can't.
can't.
I can't do.
This might be able to do it. Can you see the red dot now?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So obviously you can see the playground here. Here's Nahant Road. Here's, obviously the upper cobble dune system. And you can see the washover dune material kind of moving landward. This is the existing condition plan. What I wanted to highlight here is the gray area here is the existing cobble face. Right here is the life-saving station, playground right here, Little Nahant. You can see here mean high water running along the solid line, annual high tide, the next solid line up. What we're going to talk about in a bit is some of the woody vegetation that's in here, and you'll see that later in the proposed plan and how we're avoiding impacts to that. As part of the dune nourishment and developing it, we took sediment samples from along the dune system. There were 3 samples, 1, 3, and 2. Those samples were sent to the lab, Briggs Engineering and Testing, and a grain size analysis was conducted on them. The main points that I wanted to point out here is you can see the 3 solid lines. The solid lines are the composite curves for each of the grain size samples. The 2 dashed lines are, each of the solid lines is a single sample result. The 2 dashed lines are composite sample. The yellow sample here, which was taken from the beach, obviously you can see here, basically here at just below 0.1 millimeters to about 4 millimeters is sand. From about 4 millimeters to 3.4 inches is gravel, and beyond that is cobble. So for the beach sample, you can see we're roughly 85% sand with some gravel and cobble mixed in. For the 2 samples, the blue and the purple, which were taken from the dune system, you can see that the composition of sand, gravel, and cobble obviously is drastically different. For each of these samples, there's about 25 to 42% sand. Moving over here to about 88% gravel, which would mean we'd have about 45% in there with cobble after that. What we were looking to do with the dune nourishment is to follow this green composite line as our representative mix. So that'd be roughly 35% sand, 45% gravel, and 20% cobble. That will be done on site by using natural sand, natural rounded gravel, and cobble that can be ordered from various pits around New England and brought in. Likely the delivery will come from several pits all at once. Sand components coming in, rounded cobble and gravel coming in from different pits, and that can be mixed on site and placed within a dune template. I just kind of wanted to highlight some of the composition of the existing dune. Here we are closer to Little Nahant. You can see the kind of large grain size of the cobble dune. This is looking eastward, and you can see kind of a similar composition of cobble. Up here in the table is the upper beach and dune composites with representative grain size for D16, D50, and D84. So on the beach, you can see we have a good deal of fine grained sand material. D50 is just 0.3 millimeters, which is actually very fine. D84 is just over a millimeter. When we get to the dune, you can see it changes pretty quickly. We have the same fine sand component, which as you'd expect because the material is mixing with the beach and the face of the dune. But once we get to D50, we move up to 29.6 millimeters, which is about 1.1 inches. And D84 is 86 millimeters, which is about 3.4 inches. The one thing that's interesting to note is down here in Little Nahant, where we get a larger amount of wave energy just due to the natural predominance of waves coming out of the east and northeast. We have coarser material than we find kind of in the middle of Short Beach, which we'll see next. This is about midway between the life-saving station and Little Nahant. You can see here we still have a cobble dune face, but the material has gotten a little bit finer, which is what we saw when we were looking at the grain size samples 2 slides ago. This is the proposed plan. There's a few things I wanted to highlight here as we talk through. I'll show you the cross sections in a bit, but this will be AA, which is closer to life-saving station, BB, which is about mid point in the project, and CC, which is down here by Little Nahant. You can see that the seaward face, the dune nourishment, stays above the annual high tide line. It's significant for 2 reasons. Obviously, being above mean high water removes us from DEP's jurisdiction, or not DEP's jurisdiction. We don't have to file for we wouldn't have to file for a Chapter 91 permit because we're placing fill above that. The other important reason about being above annual high tide line is that takes us out of core jurisdiction too. The area also has no listed threatened or endangered species in it, so no concerns from national heritage. On the back side here, you can see that the dune back template kind of varies. The reason for that is there's a good deal of woody vegetation and cedars in this area, and those areas are important not only for habitat, but for helping to stabilize the dune. So we avoided impacting any of the large growth trees that were present. And so that's where you see the variability. Both the seaward face and the landward face have the same slope, which would be 1 vertical to 3 horizontal. We're going to go up to elevation 18. You'll see in the cross sections in a bit. The crest varies. It goes from roughly 13 to kind of the highest point, which is about in here, which is about 15. Kind of averages right around that 14 mark. And anything else I wanted to highlight on this? Obviously, another important issue is the access point, which I'll talk about in the next slide, which is here. And overall, this project represents about 13,200 cubic yards of dune nourishment material that'll be placed. This is kind of a blow up of the access point. What you can see here is the current access point runs roughly in this orientation. The issue with having an access point at this orientation is it's basically aligned with the incoming waves. So as people use that access point and it lowers down, what we're doing is basically funneling stormwater from the front side of the beach to the back side of the beach, kind of sort of jeopardizing what we're trying to do by raising the elevation of the dune to prevent stormwater from, reaching Nahant Road and causing inland flooding. So our proposal is to use kind of the existing starting point here on the access point, come up to the crest of the nourishment, which would be at elevation 18, come across, and then come down the face of the beach slope here. The access point will have kind of the symbolic fencing, which is similar to the rest of the areas that you see around Little Nahant. So that's a 4x4 post with rope in between the posts. Sand fencing could also be used in these just to kind of cordon people off. For an access point, this is a Moby mat, which is a commercially available product. This is actually in Plum Island. And you can see here that it's going through the dune. We're having really nice vegetation on either side, symbolic fencing to keep people cordoned on here. And I know in the past this has been an issue relative in town. The key point about having an access point, especially with a restored dune system, is that if we don't provide an access point, people are going to find their own access points. And once we've gone through the trouble of raising the dune elevation, revegetating, is that we'd really like to control how people access the beach and maintain not only the vegetation, but the habitat and also the storm damage reduction potential of the restored dune. These are the three cross sections that I identified earlier. AA is on top, BB is in the middle, and CC is on the bottom. Over to the right-hand side is the seaward side. Left-hand side is the landward side. So AA, which was closest to the life-saving station, you can see the dune face beginning to come right up here on the solid line. Just below it is the existing profile. And you can see the top crest elevation at this profile of the existing beach is like 14.38 feet. We're going up to 18 at 3-on-1 slope, variable crest width at 18, and then 3-on-1 slope down. In this area, we're at the life-saving station, and so you can see the limit of the rope fence right here. So we're not impacting kind of existing functions that they use the outside space around the life-saving station by improving the dune system. Going down to BB, you can see the woody vegetation here, which we identified on the previous plans, and we're tying in just before that area starts to avoid any impacts and to preserve this growth. Down here at CC, you can see this is the limit of the park area here, so we'll tie the dune in just at the existing rope fence, progress upwards, flat across, and then down to the dune face. Another key feature that's important relative to 18 is FEMA flood zone is for the 100-year still water elevation is at elevation 16. So by raising the dune up to 18, we get 2 feet of clearance. Obviously, that's a still water elevation. Being a still water elevation, it does not have waves on top. So with that extra 2 feet, we will start to reduce wave overtopping, wave overwash during big storms, which can obviously impact the landward area, which is being Nahant Road, which we're trying to protect and prevent inland flooding. I want to cover what the resource area impacts are going to be. So there's 4 resource areas: land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is covered under 310 CMR, but also the Nahant Wetland Regulations, Section 5, coastal beach, and barrier beach. Barrier beach obviously follows the provisions of coastal beach, and then obviously coastal dune. I thought it was important to go through the 8 caveats relative to the Nahant wetlands section. They're in order as I go through them. I won't read these verbatim, but by increasing the volume of the dune, we're going to enhance the natural ability to kind of contain storm surge. So obviously, as that dune comes up, the waves come up the beach. We have overwashing, and obviously, the more height and the more volume we have, the more resilient that dune will be for low to severe storms. Increasing the dune height and volume again won't affect the land's ability to buffer inland areas from storm flooding and wave damage. It'll actually enhance that. We are not going to displace any floodwaters. Obviously, the ocean's an infinite source by maintaining or preventing the ocean from proceeding landward. We won't see any increases in flood elevations. There's going to be no damage to people's homes, structures, or property with this project. It's all contained on town of Nahant land, and will all be contained within the existing dune system. It's just getting enhanced and increasing the volume of that dune. There will be no pollution relative to groundwater, surface water due to this project. The material as it comes in will be specified to have less than 5% fines. What we generally find when we're looking at these natural sources for rounded stone and rounded cobble is that there is very little fines in it. It's just glacial outwash. There's sources basically in southern Massachusetts down towards Plymouth, but there's also a fairly good source up in New Hampshire. And both those sources have fines on the order of like 3%. But that'll obviously be an important clause as this goes out to construction to ensure that stays true. And with the dune nourishment, preserving the trees, revegetating afterwards, will obviously maintain the wildlife habitat that exists, and obviously the migration corridors. There will be a temporary impact as that material goes in before the vegetation is replanted, but that'll all happen in quick succession. So any impacts would be very minimal and very short in duration. And obviously, restoring the dune is obviously not going to increase the elevation or velocity of floodwaters. And the dune, obviously, talking to CZM, DEP, they'd all like the dunes to be able to continue to migrate landward as they see fit. It's a little different and a little difficult here in Nahant, with Nahant Road immediately behind the dune. So in a sense, we really don't want the dune to migrate, but by nourishing and adding volume, we're not preventing any of the natural processes from causing the dune to migrate from occurring. When we look at 310 CMR relative to coastal beaches and barrier beaches, obviously by adding nourishment to the dune system, we're not impeding transport of beach sediments. Raising the dune elevation will increase the ability to dissipate wave energy and overtopping. We're going to go through great lengths to ensure the sediment is consistent and dune compatible in this category. So we'll be placing the material that is, basically native to what's out there, just from a different source. And obviously, proposed nourishments are not going to increase erosion or decrease the volume of the beach or dune. So when we go down to 310 CMR 1028 relative to the dune, it's kind of the same impacts that we would expect before. We're increasing the volume of dune. We're not affecting the ability to dissipate wave energy or remove sand from the dunes, or we'll have a minor disturbance to the vegetation cover, but that will be actually replaced once this dune is revegetated. And we have gone to the trouble of preserving all the woody vegetation for all the positive impacts that will have on stabilizing the dune and stabilizing that area for habitat and wildlife. Obviously, we're not in fact altering or interfering with the land removal of the dune. Sediment is going to be added to the nourishment, so no sediment will be removed during this project. Everything will be in addition. And there is no map nesting bird habitat within the project area. So that kind of wraps up what our impacts are. And this is just another aerial photograph from March 2nd, 2018, kind of showing the aftermath of the first nor'easter that occurred that month. And you can see once again, the predominance of cobble up on the dune face with the sand that's been washed out to shore during the storm, and the heavy working of the beach due to the wave energy and storm waves coming in. But also some of the overwash areas impacts to the park area on the landward side. I'd like to turn this over to the commission and field any questions if they have any, please.
Yeah. Trey, Jim McCauley here. We live at 5 Hour Road. I just wanted to say, I think you've done a great job in teeing this up, and we fully support it.
Thank you, Jim.
Go ahead, Eden.
No, go ahead, Mark. It's all right.
I was just gonna ask you, I know in there it talks about how many trucks and stuff. How is the gravel and everything coming in over the top or from the beach and then up with a backhoe or a loader?
Yeah. So the material obviously be trucked on the site using likely 18-wheel dump trucks coming down Nahant Road. The access point we would like to use is coming. And basically from this picture, if you can see where that white car is, about where my red pointer is, we can come through the park there, adjust the fencing, and actually deposit material on the back side right here. The material then would be graded using a front end loader or a bulldozer depending on what the contractor would like to use, which in this case, the contractor is likely going to be DPW, basically how it's currently lined up. But the material will obviously be trucked in, offloaded, and then pushed into the template.
So would there be a surveyor on site to make sure that the DPW's conforming to the plan?
There would be, obviously before the project, we would stake the seaward extent and the landward extent.
Yeah.
We can also indicate through stakes what elevation 18 is. So I don't think that there would be a surveyor on site continuously, but the Dune we would have regular kind of checks through either a site engineer or through a surveyor to determine the elevations and the extents are correct. The one thing I should point out here is that with 13,200 cubic yards of sediment, the cost is fairly significant.
Yeah.
And so it's likely that this project will get done as funding becomes available. Currently, the town has FEMA funding from the 2018 storms, which is roughly, I think, $100,000. So that would start the project. The town is also looking for additional FEMA funds to continue this project, not only up to the life-saving station, but all the way over to Nahant. And the price tag for that is, I think, just over $2 million. So as funding becomes available, I think we'll see different areas get nourished. Obviously, the most critical area at the moment is this stretch here close to Little Nahant, just due to the way the waves come in from the east, and really kind of scour out this area with the loss of height and the loss of dune volume.
With the nourishment, is there any planting going along with this, or is it just putting in the material?
They'll be planting. So the one aspect we haven't identified through the town yet, there's two possibilities. You can obviously buy beach grass, comes in, I'm sure you guys already know this, it comes in bare root, or you can get it in clumps and plant it. But also the existing beach grass that's present that will get covered over. If it's a thin veneer, the beach grass will come right back through. But in the areas where it's thicker, we can actually harvest the beach grass, initially put it in 5-gallon buckets and then replant it. And that would be more of a volunteer effort, especially if the AmeriCorps volunteers were available. So depending on resources and the town has, that'll kind of be determined at the time, but the plan is to replant.
Okay,
And-
I think one of the biggest complaints about this is when this was done previously, obviously we ended up with a lot of invasives. So
Yes.
right now those are cut, which we don't, obviously that shouldn't be happening. So we want to get to the point where it's vegetation that's native and we're not dealing with the same invasive problem, and it's kind of a hands-off situation instead of a constant maintenance.
Sure. I got a question similar to this from one of the residents, and they were asking if jute or core material could be laid out in the thin mats for beach grass. Relative to beach grass, they don't sell pre-seeded kind of jute rolls that you could lay across the dune.
Right.
Beach grass doesn't grow that way.
Yeah.
So it would have to come in plugs, whether we're buying it or transplanting it. With projects like this, or even salt marsh restorations, it's generally a 3-year cycle from initial planting, and then obviously 3 more growing seasons till we get full kind of robust vegetation. And during that time, after year 1, year 2, year 3, there is a component of coming in and dealing with invasives. Obviously, the invasive seeds are moving through birds blown by the air, and so
Right.
they will be introduced to the dune system and will have to be addressed.
Okay.
I know already on the Dune, probably the other end, we did a big volunteer planting organized by Swim last year that planted like 1,000 dune grass seedlings in a couple of hours of volunteering. It went really fast.
Yeah.
Try something to do again.
With a good group of people, it can go quite quickly.
Well, the reason I ask about the plants, we have, as you know, there's a real problem with people creating their own pathway. And
Exactly.
without plants in there, I think it kind of opens it up a little bit more. The fencing isn't entirely effective. So the more plants that we can get in there in the beginning, and maybe not just dune grass, but, you know, maybe something with some thorns to, you know, like the Rosa rugosa I know isn't native, but I think it's Rosa virginianus or something like that, which is a cousin of it, but it is native. That has thorns, I think. But is that something, is that even part of the plan, or could we ask for something like that just so that we can make it inhospitable to go outside of the proposed walkway?
Yeah, obviously, I'm open to the commission's suggestions relative to planting, and we could definitely incorporate other types of vegetation. The one thing I have noticed and I was amazed by is that having walked the pathway starting at Nahant and walking down towards Little Nahant, is it's really well vegetated, and people, at least up to life saving stations, really don't seem to stray from the crest. They stay quite in the path. But I will also say that there is a fair bit of vegetation that would prevent them from going left or right because of the prickers. So as this gets planted, obviously the variation off the set paths that we would like to set up is more predominant around those access points. So we could incorporate native vegetation or other vegetation. We can do this with consultation with Kristen when we get to that point of putting that strategically. So it helps keep people within the access areas that we like to designate for them to maintain the dune.
Can you, just on that note, could you go back to slide 9 where you show where the access path is? Is it where the existing one is now?
Yeah, so right here, and it's a little bit hard to see, you can see the gray dash. This is the existing pathway right now. It runs like this over the crest of the dune.
Yeah.
So we'll use the same starting point here at the back of the playground, come up the backside of the dune face, kind of basically perpendicular to the beach across the crest, and then slope downwards back towards
Little Nahant. So I've been in Little Nahant for a long time, and that path was actually, I mean, it was created by people just blazing their own trail to get on the beach. And I think it's great what you're doing. I may be way too late to the party to bring this up, but the concern that I see here is it's going to bring people out in the middle of where the biggest deposit of algae is. And the reason that people cut through, I mean, I speak from personal experience, I hate to say it, but, you know, being a kid in Little Nahant, we would try to avoid the algae and cut through, find our way through the, you know, the Rosa rugosa. And I just fear that that's going to be, that problem is going to come up again. So I don't know that there's anything that can be done about it, but I just,
you know, the one thing we could do, and I think it'd be easy to do after the hearing during construction, especially in consultation with Kristen and also DPW, is that, you know, if there's a large feeling that, you know, and I've seen it out here where it's fairly heavy, is that, you know, we could close up this access point here, migrate it, you know, still in the park down here, and do kind of a similar shape. And really what we're trying to do is avoid getting waves coming down that path.
yeah,
But we could migrate it eastward a bit. It'll look the same. And we can make that call, yeah, obviously, you know, in consultation with the town departments at the most appropriate location where they think that would, you know, best be suited. But the idea of the pathway would remain the same to, you know, obviously prevent that lowering of the dune across that crest.
Yeah. And that's great, because that playground just gets full of sediment. And I mean, that playground has been kind of a,
I think even the problem with the existing path is it was kind of created through force rather than planning, you know what I mean? And I know that that neighborhood, the Little Nahant needs an access, and I agree with that. However, the current orientation is not beneficial. It's not protective of Nahant Road. So, you know,
Totally agree.
you know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
it needs to have a crick in it, or, you know, a turn in it at some point. Whether it shifts towards the life-saving station, I think that's fine, but I think it can't be a straight shot anymore just because we're not protecting our infrastructure on the other side.
Right, and I understand that. I just wanted to bring up that where it's letting out, you know, I think it's great that it's angled. It just, I'm worried that somebody's gonna do the same thing again.
Yeah. Eden, Jim McCauley here again, 5 Howe Road, live right in that corner.
Mhm.
I think you're absolutely right. And so I have a question for Trey. There's no option of using the existing cut, but instead of angling it, you know, towards Little Nahant, you angled it towards, you know, the other side. Is that an option, or is that a little bit complicated?
That was my initial thought too, but then you have the same problem of the water going straight up the path, don't you, Trey?
So I just, let me clarify if I understand you. So you're both suggesting maybe just a access point kind of running in a straight line like this.
No.
In the other direction.
No.
Mirror image of what
No.
you're planning on creating.
Yeah.
Oh,
Permit me to explain my thought. You
Sorry.
use the same cut, and instead of going towards Little Nahant, you went the other way. You know, in other words, you went towards
Oh,
the
yeah.
state.
No, I see what you're saying. So instead of curving off this way towards Little Nahant, we would curve off like this.
That's right.
The issue with that is we're still kind of aligning that path with the incoming waves. And so
I
that's
see.
the issue.
Yeah. I see.
Yeah.
And, you know,
So is there another option to build on Eden's very good point? Can you just remove the seaweed? I mean, is there a way to periodically come in there and do something about the seaweed?
Well, they scrape the beach, but they never quite get in that, like they can't really get in there because of all the cobble. It's my feeling, but
I mean, I think if we're doing a dune reshaping in that section, I think it's probably the best option would be to shift towards the life-saving station and try to have the orientation kind of come out where it currently comes out. So your entrance would be further towards the life-saving station, but you'd still pop out where you do now, something similar to that.
yeah.
So you'd
And
have to
still
walk a
use
little
that
further
same-
down to get to the same spot, but it would protect the playground in Nahant Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would be
And-
the same angled path.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
exactly. So the current path ends right here about station 1200. So
Mhm.
we could come off at an angle like this up the dune or the dune face across the crest and then come back in here to the park. So obviously there's a bit longer of a walk to the beginning point, but it would actually improve access if people were coming down the sidewalk from Little Nahant. About instead of going through the entire park area over to this access point, it'd be a shorter walk to the access point up and over.
Yep.
I mean, it
So
would be a nicer landing point, but it also serves the purpose of protecting,
Yeah,
which is the main impetus for this.
sure.
That makes
And
some good sense. That makes some good sense.
And I think removing the seaweed mechanically, certainly we do that in the summer, but people still want access to the beach in the winter. And if it weren't maintained every day, literally, people would have an incentive on an off day to create a new path. So I think moving is definitely the way to go, in my opinion.
I agree.
But
Henry.
Henry, I might just add too, that if you live in that area, the removal doesn't always remove the aroma that comes. And so if you live close to the water, it's a problem.
Or even up at the top of the hill in Little Nahant. Your very diplomatic word aroma still makes its way up there.
And I assume,
Just another question or comment. I noticed in the last beach cleanup that the DPW tends to, you know, what they don't, when they clean the beach, they tend to push a lot of it up on the dune.
On the
And,
Little Nahant end.
and before they even get to Little Nahant, it goes up. But it occurred to me that if they at least pushed it up at the same angle as the bottom of your drawing, it would probably be better than just straight up.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right there. You're absolutely right. It is a problem, and it's a hygienic. It's not an enjoyable event.
I think that this is maybe an education opportunity for the DPW as well. You know, if we're going to go through the effort of creating this amazing dune that's going to protect us and it's going to be attractive and well vegetated, that, you know, we can work with them to set up some protocols so that they're doing something that, you know, both benefits the beach and isn't detrimental to the dune.
Yeah,
And I'm
and we
sure
can-
Zach would be open to that.
You know, having spoken to Zach through kind of the planning process, he's, you know, definitely open to ideas and learning and seeing how he can improve what they do relative to, you know, preserving the resources and actually, you know, this obviously new resilient infrastructure that goes in place.
And sorry to go back to the access, but currently there's a concrete access at the very, very end. Is that going to be removed, or is that going to stay there? If so, it looks like it goes into the dune. So would you have a mat or something to get to the beach there as well?
Currently, my understanding based on lot lines is that concrete pad.
I apologize. Can you repeat that?
I'm sorry, it was just breaking up on my end, so I paused.
Sure. No.
Based on property lines, I believe that concrete pad is not on town land, so we're not proposing to remove it. Obviously, I've heard some different variations on how often that's used, but if it becomes an access point issue, obviously, I believe it's right about here. We could obviously, depending on dune, you know, provide a kind of a fenced or mat access here to provide that access around over the revised access point here. But there is no plan to remove that concrete.
If the concrete's actually shown in your picture, it's that rectangular block. If you go further down with your
Oh, right
cursor.
here. Oh, yeah.
Correct. Yep.
No, we're not planning on removing that. That would literally just get covered.
Okay.
Kristen, just to come back to your point, you know, about a teaching moment for the DPW, you know, those people who live on Little Nahant, right in that area where that red spot is now, that's where the seaweed accumulates.
Mhm.
And if there were a way to periodically, you know, have that addressed, we'd solve this problem 100%.
I think we got to talk to, you know, the good news is Zach's a new director and he's open to changing the way that we've always done things. So he's not one of those, you know, he wants to keep things the same. So I think it'll be a matter of looking at it and talking about what our options are, what's feasible for them workload wise, and what we can do there.
Sure. Well, look, if there's any way that any of the neighbors there can help, you know, we'd love to, you know, be able to give those people some of the facts, such as those who live there, so that they understand, you know, the magnitude of the problem and when it arises and what might be done to be able to fix it.
Yeah, definitely. Colleen, you want to jump in?
Yeah. So I had a question. This is going to seem a little bit like heresy, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, because I think I have concerns that we're trying to rebuild a dune at significant volume in too narrow a spot. And I wonder, so that this can be a more permanent, you know, fix for a long period of time, so we're not doing this repetitively. If we shouldn't be thinking about, you know, trying to build a dune in such a narrow corridor, we shouldn't be thinking about relocating the playground. We have a lot of playgrounds in town. I'm not saying that this isn't a nice playground, but it's also a playground near a really busy road. And dogs have run out from that playground and children have run out from that playground into the busy road. So it's not exactly well situated from a safety standpoint, because people are going at a fairly high clip when they come into town. and it's not very well lit. So when teenagers or kids are there in the evening and then they venture to the road, I would like to see this have a much broader rebuild of the dune that gives some real estate from that area. I realize some people won't be happy, but we have to protect a road and we have to protect the dune. And I think piling up sand on top of a very narrow base, it has may not be, I mean, I'd like to hear what the consultant says about that.
Sure. Let's see, cross second. So this is CC, so this would be in the area of where the playground is. Let me see. So you can see actually the crest width is fairly wide. It's roughly 20 feet or just shy of 20 feet, 15 feet in width before coming down. So we actually do get a fair bit of dune volume in there. And the one thing to keep in mind with this dune is it's dynamic. And part of the benefit of having mixed sediment dune, especially in this location, is once we restore the volume, especially with beach compatible or dune compatible material with the sand, gravel, and cobble, is that dune face is going to be better able to withstand wave energy coming in and preventing that damage. Looking at Short Beach as a whole, obviously, the town has a lot of work ahead of it to not only deal with, from Little Nahant to Life Saving Station, but then, going further eastward all the way down to Nahant. So at the moment, I think with the location of the playground and the area it represents, it obviously provides us a fairly good staging point for constructing this dune and increasing the resiliency. If I thought we needed that area, I would have pushed much harder to try to convert it over. But I think at the moment, with the resources we have available, I think this is the best solution, and that part is not really representing any kind of impediment to increasing resiliency.
Thank you.
Shouldn't the dune grow if it doesn't get washed out? Shouldn't it continue to get bigger?
Well, if we were in an area that had a lot of sediment available, where we'd have windblown sand and things like that, you would see the migration of sand and possibly the increase in dune height or dune volume. However, we're basically in a pocket beach here. It's a fairly long pocket beach, being Short Beach, but we don't have that excess availability of material coming in. So in that sense, I don't see this dune growing in volume or in heights naturally. I do see the dune face moving off its 3-on-1 construction template to having a series of berms in response to wave impacts. But that's part of how a cobble beach responds, is that you'll see different ridges at different points based on water elevation, wave heights, and that's just kind of the natural response. And actually that's helping to dissipate wave energy. So basically, no, I don't see this increasing in volume on its own. I do see the beach face responding to the wave energy coming in, and so it will reshape, but stay in its general template.
So over time, as it reshapes, I think the Public Works inclination is to bring it back to what it was when we built it. Is that something they should be doing or should not be doing?
I would say, if we're talking about beach scraping, I would not suggest moving material down close to the water line. Obviously, keeping material up high in the profile where it's available during storm events is more important. And in the case of if we have erosion and we do move material seaward a bit, I think the best solution here, especially looking forward at sea level rise projections, would be to augment the dune with additional material as opposed to scraping what's there. If we scrape the beach, we lower the beach, that changes how fast waves are dissipated as they come in, allowing bigger waves to impact the dunes. So as we play this game of playing with just the sandbox that Short Beach is that if, as we move material around, we're going to have impacts. And so if we have a big event and we need additional material, I think it's important it comes from an outside source.
Okay. And so the source that you had talked about getting it from New Hampshire potentially, and Northeastern did a Dune project. And one of the concerns was color compatibility. I think that's one of the things that's often shocking to people. At Northeastern, what they were bringing in was largely brown versus, more gray that we have now. What do you anticipate as far as color for material?
Obviously, so Northeastern actually, so that was Canoe Beach.
Yep.
That beach is more of a full shingle beach where you have, gravel pretty much all the way down through the intertidal range with some sand spots where it levels out.
Mhm.
So it's a bit different. We're bringing in obviously dune material color-wise.
I just
I
want to be
think-
prepared because people are going to be shocked. You know what I mean?
And you're probably not going to like this answer, is that the sources of rounded material as opposed to angular rocks are somewhat limited in
Yep.
availability. I have seen the gamut, but it does change depending on what vein they're in. And so over time, we've gone from browns to grays. So it does change over time. The problem is I can't specify the
Right.
color depending on when we order. So when we order, obviously, as we're looking at quarries and trying to figure out what trucks are coming from which, so we get our grain size, nailed down as we're doing it.
Yep.
Obviously, I can make color a priority, but it's more likely going to have whatever's available.
That's fine. I just
getting the
Kristen?
grade-
I just want to get that on the record because I know people are going to be upset.
no, and the gradation is more important, obviously.
Yeah, Kristen,
Yeah, Tom.
Kristen, this is a pretty complex project. Could we get a site visit going with this?
Yeah, if we want to. I mean, what is it? Is there, yes, of course. Is there something specific that you,
Well, I think the whole general area, I think your point of compatibility with the existing beach is probably key to that discussion.
I mean, to me, color seems trivial versus grain size.
Well, that's the other thing. I'm wondering if we could get the sample sizes expressed by sieve sizes, percentages and sieve sizes. And I'd also like to see a sample off of the beach below high water.
Actually, connected or attached to the notice of intent that came in are all the lab testing results, which does rate it all by sieve.
Okay.
And sample 3, which I believe is in the middle, was below mean high water. And so,
I mean, down on the beach, down where it's underwater most of the time, on the beach.
what
What value does that provide? We're not touching it.
yeah, so
No, but that's the nourishment from our Dune project will be impacting that sieve size down there.
no, actually, I would disagree with that point. So obviously, here's mean high water right here. Here's the mean tide line. So if we're taking samples down here, that's going to be very similar in nature to this yellow curve here. And what we can see is here's 1 millimeter. So we can use this line here, is that a predominance of this sand is very fine, less than 1 millimeter. Here in this case, that's 85% passing. So very fine material. And as we go further out on the beach, that's just going to increase. We're
That's
not
the
trying.
That's the beach sand that you have when you're on the beach down there. It's not the lower gradation, the heavier gradation. It's that fine gradation of the gray sand, which is what is altered with this project.
Why is it altered? We're not
well,
going below mean high tide.
No, but the new nourishment will wash down there.
Well, with the grain sizes that we're using, which is predominantly going to be, coarser sand, gravel and cobble, is that you're going to see a very similar formation to what's existing, is that
It'll be coarser though.
it'll be not, it won't be coarser, it'll be very similar. And what you can find, even if you go back here in the vegetation and dig test holes, is that you see very similar composition. Obviously here, all the rock is just on the face, but if you dig below the face of that, you get the consistent samples of a mix of sand, gravel, and cobble in here, but it's also true in the backside. And so as we nourish and come up and over and down, is we're going to maintain a lot of this material in this location. During storm events, it's going to be pushing it landward. We're going to get very little, just due to, especially due to grain size, pulling that back seaward. So I don't expect to see any of this coarser material down at the, even mean tide line or even much below mean high water. It's all going to stay up here in the dune system where it's needed.
So it won't look like Revere Beach.
No, it won't. Revere Beach. The one thing is, as we get to those, Revere or Winthrop, they're obviously directly east facing, and so they get worked a lot harder than Short Beach does. They're also manipulated a lot, where the beach face itself is manipulated. Obviously, Winthrop, you've seen or likely are aware of them, mining sand from behind the Five Sisters and moving it up and down, which has actually done a great deal for reducing storm damage in the neighborhoods behind. I've heard of the complaints of changing the beach characteristics relative to bathing, but the other key point there is that the plovers have drastically expanded, and so in a sense, it's been quite successful. And after a few winters of sorting that material, is that they are finding those beach spots again to go down on the beach. In this case, we're not reworking this beach area. We're really just nourishing the existing dune with the same material that you would be finding in the dune. We're just enhancing the height back to likely very close to what it was prior to these big events coming in, and increasing the volume where we've lost material landward in the past.
So would it be possible to strip off the existing material, put your backfill in there, and then retop it with the existing material once again?
There's, with the composition that we're specifying during construction, is that we'll obviously have a mixed face in here, but after the first storm, we're going to see that sand and gravel, especially on that dune face, is undulate and actually regrade itself, and so it will actually quickly look. We'll have this gravel cobble face again very quickly, just doing it naturally. That's the whole point of actually making the entire dune from the seaward face to the landward face kind of a continuous, a uniform mix of material. So if we were just to put a sand core in or just a cobble core, is that we'd have erosive face, but as we got through that initial protection, is that it would quickly erode all the way through because we weren't consistent in the material that we were specifying. This way, from the seaward face all the way to landward face, is that we've specified this material to be compatible to resist the wave environment that's experienced here on Short Beach. So the idea is that it's not just the initial face, but the whole dune system is set up to continually actually respond to incoming storms over time.
What time of year gives you the best opportunity for success with this project? When would you be doing this?
Obviously, the impact wise, talking to the town, they would like to do it either starting late fall, but in this case, since we're now already in January, this would be like an early spring project if we can get nice bids from the sediment providers. But we would like to be off the beach long before anybody shows up for any kind of summer activities. And also with vegetation wise, we want to get all the beach grass in place before growing season starts, which is generally you try to wrap up in April before the beach grass starts emerging out, which is typical of other vegetation. which would be a perfect time to be off the beach for construction, because that's when we start seeing activity again. And construction sites with recreational users is always problematic. And we
But
have
what, if you did it in the fall, you know, like, would it give it a better chance for some of these seedlings to root? Because my fear is that if you do it in the spring, with the hordes of summer visitors coming, there's a higher risk that the little seedlings don't get a chance to really, you know, establish themselves.
with beach grass, once it's gone dormant, so when we get it, it's actually in a dormant phase. So if we were planted, you know, say it was October, we might have a little bit of growing season up until November, but it pretty much remains dormant through the entire winter season. So actually putting it in spring, once we've gotten past that first series of storms that would be occurring that winter, it actually has a much more likely chance of succeeding because we get spring rains and things like that. So it actually goes through an entire growing season, likely before it sees its first big nor'easters, which would, you know, start sometime in October, November timeframe.
Okay.
So given that we have limited funding available currently, would the intent be to start at the Little Nahant end and work towards the life-saving station and kind of stabilize that section because that's the most critical?
Correct. And obviously, as we can check in with you, Kristen, as we determine what funding's available and kind of station out like what stations we're going to be proceeding with construction. So, you know, instead of coming back for a notice of intent, the idea was to permit this entire section and then just, you know, communicate among the town departments of, you know, when funding becomes available, what can be done and what volumes can be placed at any given time, realizing that this might be a multi-year effort as the town finds funding.
Okay. And so just to clarify, so we're looking at the Little Nahant end, we're looking at a height change on the order of 4 feet, correct?
Yeah, somewhere,
Give or take.
yeah, at the narrow side, you know, yeah, 3 feet to 4 feet in height.
I want to make that clear because
Yep.
that's, there's concerns at that end about views, and this is more, you know, this is about infrastructure protection.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, I think with people with views, I mean, we're definitely going up to elevation 18. So I think telling them the worst case scenario that we're adding 4 feet would be the best way to going.
Okay. Okay. Have you seen the existing mat that's there for beach access, or that seasonally is there? It's kind of a wooden rollout.
I have.
What do
seen
you think
that.
about that versus the one that you show that's at Plum Island?
For a pedestrian walkway, the wood mat works just as well as a Moby mat. Moby mats are become more important, especially as we look at access points closer to life-saving station, where we might have people with strollers, handicap access, and even in some of those access points, the towns asked for the ability to drive over the crest of the dune. And so those Moby mats can actually handle the weight much better and distribute it and allow that access going over. And in this case, with limited funding, I think I would look at the wood mat and see what our length is and seeing if what we could accomplish with that.
Yep.
And if need be, we could switch or do a hybrid between the two. But we could determine that as, you know, once we see what lengths are required based on how we adjust the access point.
Okay.
Obviously, a Moby mat is generally lasts longer. It's just more resilient.
Mm. Okay. Does anybody else have any?
Would it be possible to get some sort of recommendations on maintenance? You know, you talked about a 3-year till that we continually need to be able to get rid of some of the invasives. But beyond that, would it be possible, or could we ask for a maintenance, like general stuff, to help us understand how we should treat it during the first 3 years and then thereafter?
Sure. I mean, the dune itself, with the sediment, obviously within the first 3 years, if we had a major storm or a series of storms similar to 2018, we would see erosion. Obviously, we'd see erosion along the whole beach, but depending on the resources available, there might be a need to augment the volume of sediment to preserve that protection that's going in place. So that's a little bit different and will really be dependent on storms. Relative to vegetation, I can definitely come up with kind of year 1, year 2, year 3. And all the years are very similar. Obviously, the first year, our gaps between plants are the largest. And so the likelihood that we can get invasives or different things growing in there is the greatest. As each year, as the plants stabilize and grow, the inclusion of invasives becomes less and less. So less critical. But obviously, as we've all seen in all sorts of places, whether it's the dune or yards or anywhere else, is that we will get invasives at any given time, just by natural deposition of seeds. But yeah, I can develop something like that, which I can share then also with DPW. So as they're looking at the dune and thinking about maintenance, it really wouldn't take very long for someone to cover that 1,200 feet and just kind of pull out invasives and then take them off site.
And could you also talk about how to do it? And because personally, I cringe when I see the DPW up there with a weed whacker, and I don't want that to continue. And I may be wrong. Maybe that is the way to maintain it. But not only what to do, but maybe how to do it would be awesome to help us know, just so that we're doing the best for the dune.
No, certainly. And obviously, when it comes to, we can talk about beach grass and, if we're using different thorny things to keep people on access points. But when we start talking about woody vegetation and natural brush growing and cedars, obviously, those are important, and the more we can expand them, the root systems are really great for holding the dune. They also increase friction, so as we're getting waves overtopping or just water coming in, it stops that. So we can think about what other materials or what other vegetation we might want to introduce as we get closer to Little Nahant, where there's not as much tree or woody vegetation down there. But obviously, if you're trying to cut back woody vegetation for whatever particular reason, it's obviously not just pulling it out. Pulling invasives out of beach grass is really fairly easy and can be done by hand with a pair of gloves. The easiest way to get rid of it is to put it directly into a plastic trash container or yard container. That way, as you're moving along, you're not depositing any seeds from inside the plant as you're going. You then just put that into whatever kind of vehicle and then take it to the appropriate, whether it's compost pile, some kind of trash area, or however you choose to get rid of that invasive.
Great.
So I think, Trey, unfortunately, in a prior iteration of this project, they used compost material from our compost area, and it was littered with invasive seed bank. So unfortunately, we have a problem now, and I think that that's one of the things the commission's really worried about, is stemming that and hopefully transitioning it to more of a native ecosystem that will help. That so the DPW doesn't think that the answer is to go out there with a weed whacker, which I understand why they're doing it now. I don't like it, but so we can get away from that kind of maintenance.
No, and the idea here is not to bring in compost material to plant beach grass. Obviously, beach grass can go directly into the sand and grow just fine. If we start introducing different woody vegetation that we might want to grow, there might be a small hole outside the root ball where we mix in sand with some kind of compost material to kind of help that to get established over the first few seasons. But obviously that'd be a very small location where we're using any type of material like that. The goal is really beach compatible or dune compatible material that, can withstand the wave energy coming in. Because ideally this is a resiliency project for the town.
Right.
I have
Okay.
one last question, which may or may not pertain to you. It's just about the fencing that you showed on the path to Plum Island. Is
Oh.
that part of your project, or is that going to be done by someone else? Like the fencing that is further down the beach with the rope and the.
That's what we have now. So I think it'd be
Yeah.
something similar.
Well, I was just curious about if, if the concern is people walking through or one concern is people walking through while the seedlings of the beach grass are filling in, could we put something more substantial in there, at least temporarily, so they have a chance to grow?
Sure. I mean, obviously, so this is a slight difference. These are round poles with cord running through, and Nahant has 4x4 posts, which are square, with the same treatment. The one thing I can say through numerous projects is that once you provide a visual corridor for people, they really like to stay in them. People don't like to veer out. So if we can prevent paths from being made, people generally don't like going out in this vegetation. There's some other tricks we can use. If we start placing signs talking about the dangers of ticks and things like that, all very true facts, but it helps people remind them of why we don't want them in the dunes, is that, they're worried about these other things happening, and they're amazing at what they can help shape people's behavior. If we get an area where people are, cutting the rope, obviously this is a more typical sand fence here. It's something like that could be used, which obviously is harder just to kind of slip under or slip over. So, that could be used to kind of stabilize an area where people are, migrating where we don't want them. That could also be tied in with, additional plantings of, material that has prickers that makes it less conductive for walking. The one thing I will say is, obviously poison ivy is somewhat invasive, but it's amazing if you point it out to people, they really don't like going in it. So you see those areas of dunes that naturally get poison ivy moving in, which is a native material. It does keep people away. I'm not suggesting, by the way, for clarity, don't like poison ivy.
Right.
But it wouldn't surprise me to see it naturally migrate inwards, just due to the birds and animals that utilize this area as a habitat. Because it is found,
sorry, go ahead.
it is found all across the dune system there. Having walked it, there's plenty of poison ivy, so it will end up here eventually.
I mean, I think Eden's concern is particularly relevant to the Little Nahant end. Not just people coming from Little Nahant, but I know a lot of people park at the DCR beach and kind of scoot along and look for the shortest path down to our beach. And so I've noticed that there's a lot of cutting through as a result of that. And so maybe, we start with our typical fencing, and if we find that it's not being effective, we have to move to something that's a little more deterrent, whether that's snow fencing or planting things or signage or a combination.
And the nice thing is, if you're coming from Little Nahant, whether you're coming down from the DCR beach or already a resident of Little Nahant, as you're coming down the hill, and you can see that path at the edge of that park going up and over, is that, obviously you're already visually drawn to where you need to go to get to the beach. And so I believe at the side of the park, there is a chain link fence, or, a fence before it opens up. And so that naturally will keep people on the sidewalk before they can make that cut. And by, migrating the path over, as we suggested, it connects those two in proximity. And so people will be much more likely to hop on a path and follow it over, as opposed to, head out in the vegetation.
Huge signs of ticks and poison ivy. That's
And coyotes, of course.
giant plastic or artificial ticks. In the
You
grass.
can put a fake coyote in there.
Ooh, that'll do it.
Yeah, educating the public about everything that lives in their dune is a really nice deterrent.
Okay, does anybody else have anything they want to raise? Okay. do you think there's value in a site visit, guys? Or, I mean, we're all fairly familiar with this.
I'm happy to skip it, but I see it all the time, so.
I mean,
I
what's
don't
nice is, you know, this came before us a couple of years ago and we had concerns. And so the town took it seriously and got a professional who does this as their job instead of, you know, a more generalist engineer. So I've appreciated the work that Trey's put in, and it's been really thoughtful and trying to solve the problems that we had raised when we saw this project previously.
I walk that area pretty much once or twice a week, and I feel confident from what I'm looking at that I don't have additional questions that I think a site visit would solve, but I'll go with whatever the group decides.
And Kristen, as a resident, I just add, thank you very much for giving it the attention it deserves. And I think Trey's done a super job in teeing it up.
And I will say, you know, obviously, you know, after going through the NOI and then the order of condition process, is that, you know, as we reach different stages of implementation, you know, obviously we're available and can always meet on site to talk about things. And one thing that's been fairly important to Tony has been kind of public outreach and kind of really educating the citizens of Nahant about, you know, why we're doing these things, why they're important. So, you know, obviously those can dovetail into, you know, a meeting on site and talking about issues, especially, you know, in the pre-planning phases of construction or in between different phases.
And we can also condition that, you know, we want to be kept abreast of when things are starting, what the plan is. Obviously, it's a pretty visible location, so we're all driving by it regularly. And if we have concerns, we can definitely, you know, bring them to the town and have them addressed pretty quickly, I would think.
This seems like a win-win. I can't imagine. I mean, I'm sure there are people who are going to be naysayers no matter what you do, but this seems like a pretty necessary revetment. It seems like a necessary thing, you know, to prevent further damage from climate change.
Agreed.
Okay, so what does everybody think about voting this evening?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, let's just talk about some questions. I mean, some conditions first. I think we'd like to see a long-term maintenance plan attached to this so that DPW knows what we're doing going forward. That can be something that's provided after the fact, prior to the completion of construction. Notification about project approach, you know, section approach and timing.
Yeah, and even adding to that, we could come up with interim construction plans for each phase as they get implemented.
Okay.
Probably also make a note of the moving the access point.
Yeah.
Specified there.
And will everything be staked out during each construction thing so that not only the DPW knows where they're going, but also us, just because we won't really know what section of the dune is where. Do you know what I mean?
But also height, elevation.
Yeah.
Sure. So obviously we would stake out the areas that are going to be constructed. So we're not going to stake out all, you know,
Right.
all the way down a life-saving station initially.
Right.
So
Right.
Just clarifying, so we'd stake out the area of the project. And, you know, that could be one of our on-site meetings is after it's staked, just kind of describing, you know, what each stake means. So, you know, as you're walking by or driving by, you know, instead of just going, I see a stake with an orange survey flag on it, you go, oh, that's the base, that one's the crest. So it becomes, you know, much more visually, you know, understandable what you're seeing. Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah, I
Because
like
it's
that idea.
a really hard thing for us to know when we drive by or walk by.
Yeah.
Okay, so pre-stake before construction for DPW. Some oversight of the DPW work to make sure that we're constructing what we're supposed to. That I mean, it doesn't, maybe at the end of each section, somebody comes out and confirms that it's correct. And then if it needs to be tweaked, it's tweaked at that point.
Not a problem.
Particularly before we start planting.
Yes. Plantings, I want to be a condition, and then maybe some
Yeah.
discussion with the commission about what's going in. If you're gonna augment with woody, if we're gonna put it as, you know, some other variety, some other things than grasses at various
Sure.
locations.
And we could definitely, you know, condition all plantings in consultation with conservation staff. And that way, each time when we're doing a phase, and we might even vary what we have, obviously towards Little Nahant is much more beach grass.
Right.
As we go down, it gets much more woody and dense. So we can condition each phase with a planting plan with commission.
And do you recommend the planting within a certain time frame after the nourishment has been done?
Yes, well, it's conditional. So obviously, we want to get material in before it's growing season. If for whatever reason we are not able to get this in place this, you know, late winter or early spring, and it was going in place, you know, late fall, I would suggest, you know, holding off on beach grass probably until later winter, just so it goes in right before the growing season. That way the town doesn't invest money and efforts in beach grass and have it blown away by a good nor'easter before it actually has a chance to establish itself. As it's initially planted, you know, the goal of beach grass is to help stabilize the dune, but it needs a growing season to actually get those roots in place to be able to provide that capacity. And so if we were just planting beach grass in that's, you know, currently dormant, it's not going to provide that. And so I would suggest planting that closer to the growing season to protect that investment.
So could each time you do one of these, I don't know if you want to call it phases, but however, but could you also attach a timing, the best timing to do the planting for success?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I had suggested earlier, is that, you know, each time we go through one of these phases that we consult with conservation. So we can establish what our planting plan is. Are we varying it from the previous section? When are we going to plant based on what time our construction window is? You know, different forms of, you know, what we learned from the last phase. If there's something the town would like to modify based on environmental conditions or public feedback, we can do that. So I don't view this project as, you know, one stop. I've come in, I've told you about it, and we're just going to keep going forward. Is that, you know, at each phase, you know, you'll be hearing about this, and obviously being where it's located, it's a highly visible spot and everyone's going to know what we're doing. So there'll be lots of chances to call us and go, hey, I don't like this. Can we talk about it? And how can we fix this? And you know, make those changes or make improvements.
That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to see repair of the park and roadside area after vehicle access. I know it's a frequent DPW access point now. You've noticed a lot of damage over the course of a summer, so I just want to make sure that's repaired after. Reinstallation of fencing, installation of signage to prevent damage for the public.
Yep.
Does anybody else have any
I'll
conditions?
add one caveat on the park is I know the town has funding to replace some of the playground equipment there.
Yeah.
So putting that back in place might be dependent on how playground equipment is available. You know, especially if we're going this winter. I don't know what supply chain issues are relative to playground equipment, but if they take it out, planning to replace it, the goal isn't that we're not taking it out, not putting it back. It's just, it's unavailable, but it has been ordered and will be put in place. So
I guess I was more concerned about damage to the ground.
oh yeah, that will absolutely be fixed. I just wanted to be clear about the total plans the town has.
Okay, and if the playground is going to change, the town needs to talk to the commission about it. They haven't. So
Yeah,
unless
I
they're
understand.
replacing in kind, I'm just mentioning it to you in case you talk to them. Unless you're replacing in kind, there needs to be a conversation about what's going on in that playground. Because I happen to agree with Colleen, although Little Nahant enjoys the playground, I don't personally feel there should be a playground there. So I don't want to be enlarging and creating more issues over
I
time.
can't speak with much more knowledge than I know that they have money to replace equipment. That's
Okay.
about all I know at the moment. So
It was
I
voted
will
on.
relay that to the town that they need to.
Just have a conversation about it.
But I had one question. You mentioned that you probably can't get the funding to do the whole thing. You do it in phases, but if we do it in phases, do we take one section and bring it up to the height we want? Or are we talking about do everything at 1 foot and come back a year later, add another foot and add another foot?
I think from a cost perspective of actually producing the best result for the town, it's easier to finish one section and going up. Otherwise, if we keep coming back over successive seasons, we're trampling all the vegetation we put in place and always reworking in that area. So the habitat function is reduced because it's always a continual construction zone. So ideally finish an area and kind of move down in sections. And the only reason we would go back to a certain area is if we had a really significant storm event and had to go back and add volume, where that might come back in before a later area.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I just don't know if we need to make sure that it's clear to the DPW.
No, so as part of this, the next phase is to develop construction plans. And so those construction plans would be based on the dollars that are available at the given time. So we can quickly look at estimates of what sediment costs, figure out how much we can do, and then break that into manageable sections based on budget. It will not be 1,200 feet.
All right. Anybody else have any questions, concerns, comments? Okay. So do I hear a motion to issue an order of conditions with the aforementioned special conditions?
So moved. I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Passes unanimously. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Trey. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trey.
Thank you.
And I will say, if anybody has questions after this, as they're thinking about, whether it's conditions or different aspects of the project, you can obviously get my or phone number through Tony. Give me a call. Happy to talk through the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You
You
too.
too.
Two.
Okay, next up, review and approval of the meeting minutes of November 17th, 2021. Did everybody have a chance to take a look? Anybody have any changes they'd like to make? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move.
Thank you, Eden.
I'll second.
Mark, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Colleen, yes?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, cool. Anything else anybody wishes to discuss?
We can duke it out later about the little Nahant playground.
All right, that sounds good. All right, is there a motion to close?
I move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
See you in February.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.